Hello, welcome to the Draft Talk podcast, the podcast talking all things NFL draft. We have news, interviews, mock draft, scouts reports, and the legendary top fives. Of course, absolutely everything you'll need to be ready for this year's NFL draft. I'm your host, Brian. We're brought to you by the good guys at 99 Yards. And talking of good guys, as ever, I'm joined by the best of the best, three of our Draft Talk good guys, MJ, Owen, and Stu. Guys, how you doing?
Very well, Brian, and been listening to you moonlight and hosted another podcast this week as well over our 99 Yards NFL podcast there, taking over the world of hosting.
Do you notice that we didn't get called legends, but they did?
Yeah, and I caught that. So we need to maybe up our game. We need to become more than legends.
I don't know. We're not old enough to be legends yet, are we? Surely.
Go with that. Yeah. What we're good guys.
Yeah.
Come on.
Good guys, legends. They'll do.
I mean, we got 13 weeks of this. I can't start off with legends, can I? You've got to give you something to build up to. Anyway, so you're all doing okay. We're excited to talk NFL draft. Good stuff. We like to, as I mentioned, we like to do all sorts of stuff. Last week we were looking back. We awarded our very own all-rookie team. And this week we're looking forward. We're looking forward to a very important week in the draft calendar. That's, of course, next week's Senior Bowl. It starts on Tuesday, and we'll be covering absolutely all of it. Practices, interviews, and, of course, the game itself on Saturday. Very shortly, we'll be touching on some of the players that will feature. But, hey, you couldn't have a game without coaches. Previous coaches include the likes of Dan Campbell, Zach Taylor, Robert Saleh over the last couple of years. But they've made a bit of a change this year. The guys at the Senior Bowl changing the structure a little. Owen, talk us through it. And do you think it's a good idea, bad idea? What do you reckon?
Yeah, so a bit of a mix-up to what we usually see. So just to give a little bit of context, what the coaching staff at the Senior Bowl have always done is decide their leadership structure based upon the draft order. So the two highest teams who haven't changed their coaching staff usually are the two that get the gig and are the head coaches for the two of the American and the national teams at the Senior Bowl. This year, it means that there's a bit of a change. So there's going to be a mix of coaches of all non-playoff NFL teams. So all teams have been able to nominate coaches, and there'll be those teams that aren't participating in the playoffs anyway. And their votes, so the votes of the team, have been combined with votes of the Senior Bowl leadership, and they've come up with the top names for the guys who will be coaching at the Senior Bowl. So all those coaches that have been nominated, they'll all be working in elevated positions. So, for example, the head coach for the American team is the Bears OC, and the same for the national team, it's the Raiders DC. I will touch on them in a moment. But the whole point of it is that the NFL is wanting to promote the professional development of their coaches. So, really, I think I have heard Jim Nagy say he wasn't particularly a fan of this structure to start with. You know, over 70 years of the Senior Bowl, this is the first time that there's been this kind of shake-up. So it has took a lot of work for them to get around it, to see how it'll work. But I think in the long run, it will be for the benefit of the coaches and for the benefit of the players, because players now are going to have multiple teams, staff members on their coaching team rather than just one. So instead of last year just being coached by the Lions, they are going to be a complete mix of NFL teams who will get eyes on these players and more interaction. So more interaction is always good for these players. So the head coach of the American team is going to be Luke Getsy, the Bears OC, and for the national team, it's the Raiders defensive coordinator, Patrick Graham. As I said, the first time it's been done by this, it's the NFL's choice. This isn't, the Senior Bowl hasn't dictated this. It's been the choice of the NFL. It's been a bit of a puzzle for them to put together, but I think in the long run, it's going to work quite nicely. It's a little bit unusual, I must say as well, just to comment that last year they introduced HBCU colleges staff into their roster to promote diversity. That is happening again, so that is still going ahead. But I think it'll be interesting to see how it works out. But I think in the long run, it'll be really good for the players to get that interaction from other teams rather than just one.
Yeah, and I think it'll be interesting to see how some of these coaches put together their coaching staff and how they work, because it's a short space of time they're going to have to be working together to try and come up with a strategy of how they're going to address this game and what kind of paces are going to put the players through and things. I think MG is going to talk a little bit about the Patrick Graham. So from the other side of it, Luke Getsy, who's the Chicago Bears offensive coordinator, he's been in place since Matt Eberflus took over. He's been just in that job just about a year. So they've had the struggles on offense, but I don't know if that's all down to offensive coordinator or not. There's been a lot of newness to that. He was a quarterbacks coach under Matt LaFleur in Green Bay as well. So he's worked with some big names like Aaron Rodgers. He spent his time in the college game as well. He was the OC at Mississippi State and a wide receivers coach there, but he's come through various universities. Starting off at Akron, he's gone through Pittsburgh, he's been to Western Michigan, so he's been around a little bit. Although he's not particularly old, he's served his time, so it'll be interesting to see how he takes that next step up.
Yeah, so just to go back over what you said there, I think the positives are that ultimately the players get exposure to more coaches from more different teams, and that I think will be a good thing. I really like this coaching up. The people who are coordinators becoming head coaches, people who coach a position group going up to being coordinators. I think that's really positive for the professional development of the coaches. I agree, Stu. I think in a short space of time, putting together your staff and ensuring that your drills and your prep for the game is coordinated so the players understand what the game plan is, I think that will be interesting to see how that plays out. I was just going to mention Patrick Graham, just in terms of, obviously, he's currently Raiders defensive coordinator. Before that, he was Giants defensive coordinator. Just my reflections on that time, because he did an awful lot of good work with the Giants defense. But one of the things I wanted to touch on is he's definitely going to test the players' footballing IQ. He ran very exotic coverages and blitzes for his defense. So I think he will. If you're a player going to the Senior Bowl and one of your strengths is your footballing IQ, and you're on that, he's on the national side, isn't he? I think if you're on that team, then I think you may well gel quite well with Patrick Graham. I don't think Patrick Graham is going to put together a paint it by numbers week. I think he's really going to test these guys in terms of their footballing intelligence, and I think that will be really interesting to see.
Good stuff. We'll see how it works with the new coaching structure, but could be good, could be bad, but I'm sure they'll put the players through it. Talking of players, let's get on to the players. That's mainly why we're here, isn't it? Former Senior Bowl players include the likes of Dak Prescott, Justin Herbert. Go a bit further back, you got LaDainian Tomlinson, Philip Rivers. There's always some serious talent at the Senior Bowl. Talking of which, Stu, kick us off. Give us some of your top prospects that you'll be looking for at next week.
The number one guy that I'm really interested to see, and there's lots of players here that's really interested to see, the one guy that sticks out for me is Derek Hall, defensive lineman from Auburn. He is a guy who has a potential to be an ascending player, I think, in this draft. We saw it, how well the Senior Bowl did for Jermaine Johnson last year. He was a guy who was all over the press after the Senior Bowl, and he ended up being drafted 26th overall by the New York Jets. I think Hall is the one guy for me who I think might have that potential ascension with a really good Senior Bowl. He's an explosive pass rusher with all the kind of right measurables at the position, and he's also a very good run defender as well. He still has a pass rush plan to work out a little bit for me. Auburn did tend to use him as that outside linebacker, drop him into coverage a lot because he is so athletic, and I think that's maybe held him back on the pass rush side of things. But I think for me, he's the one player I'll be looking at that, if he has a good Senior Bowl, might push in the back end of that first round.
Yeah, just to pick up on Hall there, so absolutely the notes that I've got here echo that, and the thing that I've got is develop those pass moves. And obviously one of the best parts of the week are these one-on-one drills where they take on the offensive line, and I think that those are the most fun to watch. And that is where somebody like Hall needs to show that he's got some moves that, if the offensive lineman gets set and defends that kind of first move, what can he do after that? Because he's definitely explosive, and I think that's what we want to see. We want to see off the start line when he's going up against these guards or tackles, that explosion. But then has he got the moves to back that up?
Yeah, sticking with that position, because my watch list is just full of those trench guys, just all tackles and edges, because I think that is going to be where this Senior Bowl is really contested, because I feel like although there are some classes that are strong, that's where the money is going to be made in the Senior Bowl, and that's where the real stretches are going to happen. So I think a lot of these tackles and a lot of the defensive linemen are quite similarly ranked. So it's going to be my interest really is going to be on those trenches, and especially the one-on-one drills, to see who can really separate themselves, because they are all so closely matched. And one guy that I am really intrigued about is Andre Carter from Edge from Army, who's got a really interesting story coming from Army. We didn't even know whether he was going to be allowed to enter the NFL draft just a month ago. That there was some. If anyone don't know, if you are at a service, a military service academy, then you have to complete 2 mandatory years of military service once you graduate. You can get special dispensation if you're going to become an athlete, but that then needs to be completed at the end of your athletic career, or you have to repay your fees. There was a bill that went through in December that was going to stop that, and that just wasn't going to be possible, and they weren't going to be able to defer that. So all expectation was that Andre Carter wasn't going to be able to leave. Now, there's been an amendment to that bill, which means he now can, because he enrolled at the college before that bill was passed. So great for him. And he is an extremely unique player, shall we say. He's really long. He's got superb length. His arms, his wingspan's going to be huge, and he's really explosive. And he's going to be one of those players whose best football is all ahead of him. So it's going to be what do NFL teams think that they can make Andre Carter into. He doesn't really have a pass rush plan. He doesn't really. He loves the swim move. That's his go-to, and loves a spin. But that's about it. So it's going to be how these teams can train him up. So it'll be good to see him against better opposition. Because let's face it, Army don't play that good of a quality of opposition, but he's a top 40 prospect for me right now, and I'd be really interested to see if he rockets himself up, because I think he could if he turns it on against some of these better tackles.
Yeah, I think Carter will be someone who will benefit from being at the Senior Bowl, where all the focus is on football. Yeah. I think sometimes in the service academies, that's no disrespect, because they do a great job, and we've seen exciting, Army games, Navy games. I don't think the whole entire focus on everything is on football, and I think that when someone's just constantly focused on his ability to play football, I think that Andre Carter will benefit from that. I'm not quite there on him yet as a top 40 guy, but I can see why you might be. I think, he's that height, weight, speed. He's an athlete. He's massive. He's got big, long arms, and he's explosive. It's all about whether that functional strength and that pass rush plan comes together for him.
Yeah, what a story he will be. I mean, has anybody ever been drafted partly because they had to pass legislation or an amendment to legislation? I mean, that's a great story.
He'll be basically the first Army player to be drafted since the 1940s.
Yeah.
I mean, I knew it was ages. I couldn't remember how long it was, but it's ages. Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing, isn't it? And that will obviously follow him, wherever he gets drafted, and people will follow his career from now on. Obviously, because of the Army background, one of the things, in the Senior Bowl, as well as, how well you play on the field, is character. And you can do an awful lot for yourself at the Senior Bowl by, doing things in the right way. We saw last year, it was Zion Johnson, wasn't it? He was going out on the field after the practices. He was doing things in, trying out different places on the offensive line. and that really helped him out. So I think Carter will be a great story. I was just going to perhaps round off discussion on some of these defensive line guys by mentioning Isaiah Foskey from Notre Dame. His production, 2 11 sack seasons, the highest number of sacks in their history. And he's also a great character and leadership guy. He's a high-end athlete. He's a kind of a converting speed to power guy. And he's definitely an edge rusher where he's coming around the outside. He's not rushing inside. So it's, for me, with Foskey, it's going to be about the power. Can he generate the power to knock some of these top offensive line guys backwards? Because, as you've mentioned, there's quite a lot of guys who are at this point in time of a similar sort of standing, and it's things like Senior Bowl, things like the Combine later on that are going to push one guy ahead of the other.
Can I give one last shout out before we move on to a different position? And that's, wait for the pronunciation on this, Ade Adebawore from Northwestern, who, when I spoke to Jake Matthews, the interior offensive lineman that I did an interview with from Troy, that was up a couple of days ago, he said he is the best athlete that he has faced while he's been preparing for the Senior Bowl. So that's put his name up for lights on me. So I'm expecting big things from him.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot to be gained, particularly for these defensive linemen, because I think, and not giving too much away in my mind, we've kind of got Will Anderson and Jalen Carter, and then the rest in my mind. And so there's a lot of positions and, shuffling that deck and moving and finding your way up top. So guys who go to things like the Senior Bowl, or there's this weekend coming up in Vegas, we're not talking too much about, but the East-West Shrine Bowl game, guys who go and participate in these kind of things potentially do show coaches a little bit more and give them that more to work on and see. So I think the defensive line guys will be all out to impress.
And just to mention that, it's a copycat league. So you look at the teams. So NFC Championship this weekend, 49ers and Eagles, heavy in those trenches, and also able to rotate guys through. It's not as though they have a starting 4 and that's it. And as soon as you sub guys in, that's your defensive line power gone. The number of sacks that the Eagles have got, they've got multiple guys on double-digit stacks. And I think you'll find that teams will want to get that additional depth at this position.
Absolutely. So we've got a big few guys in the trenches there. Anybody sort of skill position guys we're going to look forward to? They've obviously got their one-on-ones as well.
Yes, there is, but I think they're more guys who are underrated. So I was just waiting to see if one of the guys jumped in there and there was someone that they really liked. I think a lot of the guys that the receiver position that we're going to be looking at are players that we have maybe been overlooking. And really, I'm thinking that there might be a couple of players who come out as under the radar guys who really have propelled their stock that we haven't been speaking about before. A player that I really like that I expect to have a kind of a breakout, if you like, is Nathaniel Tank Dell from Houston, who's made my top 10 receivers. Really, he's just a pure separator. The problem is he's small. He's 5'10" and 165 pounds. But his nickname's Tank. That's for a reason, right? It's not very often you're going to see that in the NFL. But I think he could be one that really succeeds in one-on-ones because he is a really good separator. So he could be one that if he can get a corner on their ankles, then he's going to be able to separate and really put himself, as long as he can catch those deep balls, then he's one who can really take that. And then another guy who's just become on the radar really is Andre Yeshivas from Princeton, another small school guy, is getting comparisons to Christian Watson, and so we'll see how that works. But if he can he's a fast guy. He apparently runs or can run in the low 4.3s. A big guy as well, 6'3", 200. So that's not to be taken lightly. So if he can turn the burners on to get some separation in those one-on-ones, then yeah, I think he could boost himself too.
I've got down here. I was just looking up this afternoon how to say Yoshibas. because yeah, he's somebody that I've only just kind of got to know and start to delve into. But yeah, he's a fantastic and fascinating prospect. Not often we get many from Princeton that we're looking at in any sort of detail. I think it's something like the fastest 60-meter dash in NCAA history. I think that's what he's capable of. And just to mention on Dell, I love guys, whether it's this position or whatever position across the field, the guys who are not the prototypical size, height, weight combination. For whatever reason, they seem to be the guys who put in the additional amount of effort, that kind of prove it effort. So somebody like Dell, who, as you say, I mean, for his height and weight, but his nickname is the Tank. I mean, that just shows you that the determination that somebody like that has, and yeah, he absolutely gets open at will.
So what you wide receiver aficionados are telling me is that American team is the team to watch, because that's two guys you mentioned there, and they also have probably the guys who I think are probably the two biggest names in that team as well. You've got Rasheed Rice from SMU and from Xavier Hutchinson from Iowa State. They're probably among the bigger names that are there at the Senior Bowl, and people probably know a bit more about those guys. They're all in the same squad. So yeah, for someone who's more different interest in positions, really, that's the team I'm going to be looking out for, is your wide receivers on that team. But I think it's a really hard environment to shine in the skill positions of Senior Bowls. It's easy to look bad in quotes at times when it's not bad players. I think it is a difficult environment to shine in. So hopefully some of these guys can do really well down there.
Yeah, I think I got Rasheed Rice. He's on my list of guys to watch. He is a good height weight combination guy and physical, those kind of jump balls downfield, and he runs really good routes. But his issue is there's nothing that's particularly amazing. There's not that high end speed. There's not the explosion. There's a lot of good stuff. And the way that we're going with the league, a team's going to look at somebody who is more explosive, who has got more high-end speed. So Rasheed Rice has got to kind of put across that in amongst all of that decent production and all those good traits that he has, that he is it's almost like he's a safe option. He's got to go out there and basically try and catch everything, especially in the contested catch. But yeah, I would agree with you, Stu, that when it comes to the game, I think the American side is the one I'm watching in terms of the wide receivers.
On the opposite side, a lot's been said by yourselves, by other things that I've listened to and read. This is a really good draft for defensive backs, especially the corners. Are there any of them corners at the Senior Bowl that you guys are going to be keeping tabs on?
Are you going to jump in there, Stu?
Yeah, I was, but you can go on if you'd like to.
Okay, I was going to mention one name. I do have a couple of names, but one name in particular, which is Tyreek Stevenson from Miami, who is a player.
I was going to jump in with.
Yeah, I hadn't watched him, but when the GOAT speaks, people listen. Daniel Jeremiah has him as a first-round player, and in the first-round mock, which means we have to have eyes on him. So let's see what he can do, because all of a sudden there's an awful lot of attention on Tyreek Stevenson that people didn't even know his name until a week ago. And then all of a sudden people are expecting huge things from him.
I think it's interesting, isn't it, that when you look at Jeremiah's mock drafts, it makes people listen for people that maybe haven't, because he's got his ear to the ground. He knows a lot of people in the league, and if he's mocking Tyreek Stevenson in the first round and putting his name out there as being the only guy that's mocking him anywhere close to that, there must be something in it. There must be something that he, unless he's just fallen in love with a guy watching him that maybe other people haven't seen, but there's got to be something in that. So he was a guy I was going to speak about just purely for that reason. He's going to be thrown into a bit more of a national attention now than maybe he would have a week ago.
I was just going to pick on one guy, and in particular, again, one of those things where he could end up doing reps at multiple positions, because when you're talking about the secondary, there's a lot of guys. Are they just pure corners? Are they safeties? Can they do this kind of linebacker or dime backer kind of position. So JL Skinner, Boise State. So again, good. So I think he's 6'4", about 220 pounds. He's going to in games he's going to be closer to the line of scrimmage if he's a safety. He's more down in that box. But I think if I was Skinner, I would be up for, well, okay, give me some reps at linebacker as well. Let's see, coverage in linebacker positions. Just because versatility, once you get past that initial defensive line, versatility behind that defensive line is only going to improve your draft stock.
I'll give you two more names. One of them, Julius Brents from Kansas State. He's a corner, really long corner, 6'4", 202 pounds, really long, uses that length to deflect passes, but is a really, really strong tackler. So interesting to see how he goes up against some of these speedy receivers. If you've watched him in college football, he absolutely locked up Quentin Johnson, who we're talking about as maybe the top wide receiver in this class. So he's one to watch. And then kind of as a safety, Chris Smith is a player from Georgia who is a true safety, will play more of that shell and backfield coverage. But he is a player who will, I think, after the Senior Bowl, be getting more kind of end of the first round, beginning of the second round kind of vibes, because he is just a really, really solid safety.
And I'm going to have to rewrite my watch list because just before we started, I was just having a look about a few things, and I just noticed that Jordan Battle had withdrawn from the Senior Bowl just a day ago, and he was one of the guys I was interested to see because he was somebody who people were very high on in the summertime and has kind of slipped off the radar a little bit, but he's actually withdrawn. So my watch list will have to be rewritten before it goes out.
There we go, a bit of admin. So I guess, guys, we've been through plenty there, and as you mentioned, the watch list will be out. Have a read of that. But yeah, any more names for while we're talking Senior Bowl?
One player I wanted to touch on was Cody Moch, or Moch. Is that I'm not quite sure you pronounce it. It makes me laugh a little bit when we hear about his name because being a tutor in our local dialect, a Moch is somebody who is a bit minging and a bit rough and a bit dodgy looking. And when you see you've probably seen this one of before college and after college, Cody Mock all with his nice short hair, and after college he's missing his teeth and his long hair, so he looks like a Mock. So he just makes me laugh when I think about him. But he's actually, in all seriousness, he's a very good player, and I think he's a guy who potentially could do himself a lot of favours at the Senior Bowl. He's a 6th-year senior, so he's been around the game a long time. He's kind of controlled, measured kind of player, but I think some of the technique in footwork might be something that he needs to work on heading towards the draft. But an interesting name to keep an eye on, particularly because there seems to be a cluster of 3 kind of tackles everyone's speaking about. Teams are always looking for tackles, so it's kind of who's the next guy up, and he will be in that group. Maybe not the one that you're going to definitely go for, but he'll be in that group of kind of next tier or 2 down from the top guys.
Yeah, I think whatever the outcome, he's going to be a player that people are speaking about by the end of practices, because we all remember last year Trevor Penning and the videos of Trevor Penning absolutely ruining guys, winding them up left, right, and centre. And that's exactly what this guy is, because he is a nasty finisher. He's going to be putting people in the ground when he doesn't have to. There's going to be clips galore of him. How many walk-on tight ends at the Division 2 level of college then go on to play offensive line and go to the Senior Bowl and get drafted is a really, really good story. But as a smaller school guy, everyone always falls in love with one at the Senior Bowl. Where I remember Quinn Miners a couple of years ago.
I was about to say, he gives me Quinn Miners vibes, doesn't he? He's got that. Yeah. You can imagine him being out like posing with his axe in the forest, like Quinn Miners was.
Yeah, and I mean, not to the same caliber of kind of player, but Cole Strange was a small school guy who ended up going in the first round last year, so he's got a real opportunity.
And I was just going to say that, recapping back to what we said on the previous podcast about our rookies of the year, when we got to the tackle position, it wasn't like we were picking guys or the offensive line as a whole. We weren't picking guys who were all first rounders. We were picking guys out of the 3rd round, 5th round who'd had really good years. So there's plenty of depth there. A lot of these guys can do themselves a lot of good at the Senior Bowl. I think you've mentioned Cody Mark there. He's a really easy mover. One of the things I'm interested in actually is who comes off better this week. Is it the guys who are kind of like easy movers? They move quite nicely laterally. So there's him. There's the guy at Syracuse, Matthew Bergeron. He's a good mover. Or is it going to be the big, strong kind of maulers? Your Darwin Jones, your Steve Avila from TCU. It's going to be really interesting to see which of these guys has the best week.
Yeah, just mentioning Matthew Bergeron there from Syracuse. He's a player that I really like, but I worry about what he could be at the Senior Bowl. I do think it's a good opportunity for him being there, but he is just a solid, smooth player, and I do worry that he might get lost behind some of these guys who are just going to be nasty and finish. But really, the NFL, we're all going to be talking about this player who's just absolutely, nastily finished some guy, but the technique maybe wasn't great, but it's just a fun clip. Whereas as a couple of players, Matthew Bergeron, I think, is one, and Darnell Wright, I think, from Tennessee, could be another player like that. Darwin Jones from Ohio State is a really good right tackle. These are all players who maybe won't get their names and the clips out there in the media because the clips weren't as fun, but the teams will look at it as being that is a solid tackle that we can slot straight in.
Yeah, we've had quite a few conversations off air about Matthew Bergeron. He's been a guy that we both really liked early on in the process as well. And I think that you're right. Teams maybe aren't quite as swayed as Twitter is about guys getting smashed into the ground. They're going to be looking at the guys who can handle the business with a minimum of fuss and not cause penalties. Because that is, you see some teams absolutely crippled with penalties, and if you can just have your technique right and you're not trying to annihilate your opponent and be stupid about it, these guys will be noticed and for the right reasons, but maybe just quietly so. Yeah. Just while we're talking about offensive line, there's a few interior guys that are there who are going to be big names. We've seen the likes of Osiris Torrance and John Michael Smith be talked about quite a lot. One of the guys I'm interested to get a bit more eyes on is Andrew Voorhees. I've seen a few mock drafts recently of him going, and it seems to be from the draft net where there's a couple of guys there. I mean, I've seen him go in the top 10 in a couple of mock drafts there, which was mega surprising, and I didn't get it at all. Why is Voorhees been drafted so highly? So I'm maybe missing something. I don't know, and I would just want to see how he gets on in this environment. I think it was about 7th or 8th. Someone had him drafted. I think it was really, really high. I can't remember whose mock draft it was, but I was like, ooh, that's high. I need to see what I'm missing there.
Yeah, I think we're both missing it there then. I don't see that. But hopefully he can show it. I was just getting my notes up on him there just to see what I had written, and it felt like his movement skills were just kind of average, and he kind of gave up a lot of leverage at times because he was lunging into tackle. So maybe if he can clean some of that up and in the one-on-ones that will come out. So that could be interesting to see.
And I guess finally, guys, is there anyone, you may have mentioned them already, anyone who's got a bit of pressure on them this week, someone who needs to have a big week or say can't have a bad week? You mentioned there players that are sort of maybe on the edge of being day 1, day 2 picks through day 3, day 2 picks, guys that can earn a lot of money this week.
I don't know if there is that guy that I think is a shoe-in for a top 10, 15 pick. Like normally the Senior Bowl will have some guys who are, they try and spread it out. So there'll be some guys who are drafted really early on, and some guys who will go undrafted, so teams can get their eyes on. They get the whole draft spectrum. I'm not sure there is that top end talent this year, mainly because they've been invited and then are just simply not going to turn up. A lot of them through injury. Tyree Wilson, Devon Witherspoon, Dalton Kincaid have all suddenly come down with injuries over the last couple of weeks. And then you've just got Will Levis out there who was given an invite and has simply just gone, F you, I'm just going to straight up decline and not even pretend to be injured. So not sure there is those type of top end players, but there's a lot of players who are going to be on that cusp of the first round just because of the lack of top end and elite talent in the draft. That there's just going to be a stack of guys probably from 20 through to, I could say 60 probably, where you could just have them in any order. And, we could be a player that we're speaking about now who would be ranked at 60 that could go in the first round because they are all that closely matched. So the Senior Bowl will be a good way for them to separate. It's just about expectations. Luke Musgrave is a guy that is getting a lot of traction at the moment, and like it or not, whether it should be or shouldn't be, momentum is a real thing when it comes to the NFL draft and carrying that in. Somehow he only played 2 games this season. I didn't even watch him in the summer, and he's played, all of a sudden his name's up in lights. I've watched him and I really like him. I think what part of it is he's 6'6", 235 pounds, and he's rumored to run in the 4.4s. He is a true athlete. So if he can, again, cause some of that separation, especially running up the seams, and he can come down with the ball, then I think you're going to see a real ascendance from him.
I don't think you'll need to read my players to watch because Owen just covered it very nicely there, because that's one of the guys I had on mine was Luke Musgrave, just for that hype reason. That, as I say, there seems to be a lot of people aboard the Luke Musgrave train. I mean, and it's interesting you mentioned about, I hadn't really thought about it, about momentum heading into a draft. Look at what happened at number 1 last year. I mean, we had initially, there was Trayvon Walker. Oh yeah, he might go to like number 30 to the Buccaneers or something. Oh, he's going up and up. Oh, he could be in the top 5. He's going to be first. And it was just that ride of momentum, and he actually did go first. So it'll be interesting to see what, maybe someone from the Senior Bowl gets that kind of momentum. I don't think so, but is there going to be someone out of nowhere that comes in the draft that's going to rocket up boards? It's really interesting to see. In Luke Musgrave I don't think he's going to be in the first round, nowhere near that kind of range, but he's a guy who a lot of people are getting behind. And when you see that name's just getting out there more, I think that's what people start to hang on to as well.
I think.
Sorry, go on, MJ.
No, I was just going to say, I just think it's something we're probably going to return to as we go through the process. But I mean, I've only been doing this for a small number of years, and already you kind of see that drift with players who perhaps do have more to lose, who all of a sudden don't play the bowl game. They don't go to the Senior Bowl. Maybe they duck out the combine. Maybe they leave it all to their pro day because they feel as though they've got too much to lose. This is there's a lot at stake here, especially if you on the basis of your production at college, you figure you might be a shoe-in for the first round. You might think, well, actually, do you know what? I've had a tough season. Maybe I'm carrying a few niggles. I'd rather just kind of sit it out for a few months, do my pro day. Whereas there are other guys, and the ones who are turning up at the Senior Bowl are in that category where actually they've got more to prove, and therefore they do want to get that momentum. And let's go to the Senior Bowl, and maybe I don't play against top tier players week in, week out, but if I have a good Senior Bowl against some of these top guys, that gives me some momentum. Go to the combine, hopefully smash that, and then start to rise up those draft boards. But I think the whole process, which is so long from the end of the college season right the way through to April, I do wonder, in future years, are we going to see a difference in that process at some point if more and more players start to duck out of parts of the draft process?
Yeah, just what I was going to say just kind of links into what you were saying there, MJ, that I was just thinking that the Senior Bowl must hate the period between the college football playoffs and where we are right now, because players are suddenly signing with agents, and the agents are getting words from their contacts throughout college football and throughout the Senior Bowl and throughout the league. And all of a sudden you get a whisper in the ear and they're going, just don't risk it. So the Senior Bowl and the staff then must absolutely hate it. I'm sure they combat it. You get dropouts every year, but it seems to be the ones this year has really hurt the top end talent, because there was guys who were going to be drafted really highly who received invites that now aren't going. And they say, I was a little bit worried about it to start with. I was, you start seeing the invites coming through and I'm thinking this is a little bit of a down year for the Senior Bowl. But when you look more deeply into it, because of outside of those 3 or 4 blue chip prospects, the talent really could go anywhere. So if you can go to the Senior Bowl and you can kind of mirror that quality, it's really going to be an opportunity for you to sort yourself out with these guys. And so the Senior Bowl has done a really nice job of maybe not getting top 20, top 15 talent, but they're getting a bunch of day 2 talent who just need to fight it out while they're down there.
Yeah, and you mentioned about some of the top end talents, not appearing this year. Like Will Levis was invited, and he's a quarterback we know is going to go in the first round. But it was only a couple of years ago, and I think he was fairly likely to go in the first round anyway. Mac Jones played, and he played the Senior Bowl, and MJ's favorite player. But
And
guys
as
like,
well, he was even more so.
Yeah, I mean, thinking about just so there's guys who have played it who you were fairly confident were going to be first round players at a premium position like quarterback who've gone, and it's a bit interesting to see, and a bit disappointing really that someone like Levis has went, nah, it's not for me.
Yeah, and if you're going to the Senior Bowl, you just look at the stats, and over the last 4 drafts, 87% of people who went to those drafts ended up on an active roster at some point during their rookie season. I mean, that's tremendous. That basically means if you get at the Senior Bowl, there is a damn good chance you're going to end up on a roster at some point during that first season, which is that's a great statistic for them.
Yeah, that's why I put a lot of stock in these smaller school prospects who end up going, because there's a reason that they go in there. NFL teams want to see what these players can do. It means that they're liked. These players who maybe wouldn't have been heard of, but we just assume we're probably going undrafted. All of a sudden, like, hang on, the NFL likes these because they want to see them up against better talent than they want to see them at the Senior Bowl. So it's a badge of honor for these guys to even get an invite.
Absolutely. Let's go head to head with our fellow classmates. I think you mentioned Will Levis. I think that's a weird one. We'll get onto it obviously in the process, but he's got stuff to prove. You think
we're going to be sick of speaking about him, I can tell you.
Let's just not talk about him. Full stop.
Yeah,
he's dinged our friends at the Senior Bowl now. You just go, nah, we're not talking about you, mate.
Personal.
We love the Senior Bowl. They always invite us to join in with stuff, and and they're really good to us. So if he's annoyed our friends at the Senior Bowl, so we're not talking about him.
How dare he? Well, there we go. I mean, anybody got any more? We've been through quite a lot of players there.
I'm sure we could keep going. We could just go through every name, start speaking. We've got more names if you want more names, but no, I think they're the key guys and some of the under the radar players that I think that you need to be looking out for. You can go and find the top players in the draft. Just go and look at big boards. You'll have them there, but these are the guys that we're expecting to do good things, who maybe aren't being spoken about enough.
Absolutely. If you want a few more names or want to read up a bit more, do check out the website, the article on there, top prospects for the Senior Bowl. It's all on there from all the guys. And that's it for this week, the draft talk this week. As I mentioned, check out the website and, of course, our Twitter, 99yard.com or at 99yards for the Twitter. It's got everything you need for the draft. Of course, the NFL still cracking on. There'll be loads of Senior Bowl stuff throughout the week. Do keep your eyes peeled on that. But yes, we'll be back in about a week. I'm unfortunately away, so Stu will be in the hot seat. You never know, I might not be allowed back, but we will see. But thank you very much for listening. Enjoy the Senior Bowl. We'll see you soon.